Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the previous speaker for warming up the audience after lunch. I don't wear golden shoes, but golden socks, so I hope this helps entertaining you during this lecture. As you can see in the title of my speech, I will talk about democratic dialogues that make smart cities work. If I talk about smart, I talk about the smart ways of involving citizens or small-scale initiatives, professional or citizen initiatives, in designing or making our cities. I accentuated work because the thematic focus of this specific lecture is a project on work. So I'm part of the group Spatial Capacity Building at the Faculty of Architecture in the University of Hasselt. And I will speak about a project that I developed together with Delva Landscape Architects. They are situated here in Amsterdam. And Plus Office Architects, and then Social Spaces, Lucas School of Arts, and then my faculty. Good, the context. So I don't work in Amsterdam or London, or I have worked in many cities, but one city that has kept fascinating me for several reasons is the city of Genk. Probably a lot of you haven't been there, although some have visited us. And Genk deals with a lot of issues, I think, that are relevant for a lot of European cities. One is that it's a clear example of a post-Fordist city. Literally, Ford, the factory, closed the doors in 2014, leaving a lot of people unemployed, and designing these alternative futures of work for this city very, very urgent. It's also a very multicultural city. All our cities are becoming more and more multicultural. It's really built from several migration waves with the mines. And a lot of cities struggle with engaging people from these different cultures in shaping this work future, while this can be an enormous inspiring activity. This is why, since I've been working for 10 years in this city, we decided last year to start up a more permanent lab in the middle of one of the cités called Winterslag, and it's called De Andere Markt, the other market. It is a living lab where we, a group of designers, architects, social scientists, together with the community in Genk, are designing alternative futures for work. It has some similarities with the open work project that Joost has been talking about, in the sense that it's also a shop front, as you can see on top. So we have a shop window, and it says the other market. Here we think work around work, and everybody is welcome to work with us. Yeah, so we develop our projects there in an open window, and people can enter, join us, and propose projects. We also offer space for small-scale initiatives, work initiatives. For instance, we're now hosting Studio Refugee, a design studio who designs together with refugees. Very soon, this studio will have its own spots in the city. Will also be the Andere Markt shopfront, but then specifically working with refugees, and Cook, working with women from different cultures, will take Studio Refugees space, probably. So that's what will happen. Now, I can talk about a lot of projects that we're developing there. We're with a lot of people having different interests, but I will talk about a project that I am still involved in now. I'm really in the middle of it, and it's called Traces of Coal, Kolensporen. And it's about designing alternative futures for an old coal track in Genk. You can see there, it's a quite long trajectory in the city. And as you can see at the bottom, that it's not very much used today. Parts of it are overgrown, are taken in by informal initiatives. Some parts are still used. Of course, government, so we got funding for doing this trajectory. They have these dreams of making it into a very smart connection that can also have a certain economic impact on the city, on the region. And our role in this project is to counter this smart dream with involving and paying attention to the small-scale initiatives, professional citizen initiatives, small farmers, small shops, whatever, that already exist alongside the Kolenspoor or the coal track. So we want to connect and involve them in thinking about, okay, what can this connection mean for the future? Should it be, again, a railway track? Or should it be a bicycle path? And in our region, they like to turn everything in bicycle paths. But there are some issues. For instance, there is no bicycle culture in Genk. People really don't like to bicycle. So that brings me to the second aspect. It's a lot about creating also a culture around this coal track. Because for years it has been abandoned. It's really a back office of the city. It's not part of the face of the city. So we want to do an effort to design, and it's a more speculative, partly speculative, partly rooted really in this engagement with the small-scale initiatives, of designing workstations. Workstations where the efforts of the different small-scale initiatives are collected in small work initiatives that can become like orientation points alongside the track, making the connection a bit more relevant and also connecting it to the city center, right? For instance, it could be that these small workstations are about bicycle workshops for women, or bicycle fixing to create this bicycle culture, if it would be a bicycle connection. But then there's the but. We feel that if you want to involve these small-scale initiatives in this kind of complex design projects that can take for years and years, there is a challenge because they often lack the experience of being a partner in these kind of complex projects. Policymakers have experience, often the larger companies have experience, architects have experience, but they often lack experience. And so we feel there's a lot of work to do in interweaving capacity building in the design process, which allows the initiatives to more equally take part in this kind of complex design process. And also, because our trajectory is funded for a year, that they can continue some of the efforts independently, because it are them who are creating these workstations and them who have to continue the efforts afterwards. We do not see capacity building because it often gets this image of I build your capacities, like the expert building the capacity of the small scale. I think it's a very multi-directional process. We learn a lot from them. Maybe they learn from us. Policymakers learn from them. So it's a very distributed process. And if we base ourselves on literature, in spatial capacity building specifically, there are 3 elements that are important. One is to visualize in the design process opportunities and challenges that exist in the spatial context, here the coal track, to collaboratively reflect on these opportunities and challenges, and then to act in the design process upon these reflections. So the way in which we give these capacity building processes form in practice is through what we call democratic dialogues. It's based on a practice that is, or it's a word that is often used in participatory design, Scandinavian participatory design, to indicate that designers and participants are participating, building capacities in more equal roles. And these democratic dialogues, because it's a design process, are not verbal dialogues exclusively, but are mediated by different artifacts that function as both subject, tools, enablers of conversation. I will give you an insight. So I made this based on the work that we have done, this overview of the types of dialogues we have been engaging in during this process to build these different capacities. The first two types are the strategic and committing dialogues that are focused more on visualizing the potential opportunities, challenges in the cold track. Reflecting was achieved more via questioning and agonistic dialogues, acting in the design process more via expressive dialogues. And I think this diversity of dialogues challenges a lot of the standard or stereotype ideas that we have about what a participatory design project is and what a more expert-driven design process is. Because often in a participatory design process, some of the more expert types of dialogues also pop up and the other way around. This image provides you an insight more on a timeline, which type of dialogues we entered in. So I think more in the beginning, we started with visualizing these opportunities and challenges by first doing a lot of data mining, studying a lot of policy documents, studies of work, population around the cold track, and so on, and translating that into maps to start discussing with the different people involved what issues were that we had to handle in this design process. We did a lot of in-depth field work, ethnographical work, alongside the cold track, interventions, interviews. Then in January, so quite recently, we started translating that in several speculative stories about what this mobile connection can mean and what these workstations could actually mean. And then co-designing, really acting, turning this into some real action plans, proposals, and so on. And then in September until April, we will start building actually a lot of these speculative scenarios, also in speculative prototypes, buildings alongside the cold track, together with the community. So that is an insight in the process. Okay, so the first dialogue that I will explore with you is the strategic dialogue. We entered in a lot of, and I think that's typical for a lot of these complex city projects, a lot of strategic dialogues in, for instance, formal monthly working meetings with policymakers and also several experts who had to guide our process. And in these dialogues, what we tried to achieve was to visualize existing data, because a lot of studies existed already on the cold track, but also visualize the data from our own studies, our own qualitative work, for these professional working groups to be able to discuss the issues at hand, also to discuss how the design brief should be, how the process should be given form, and also what we expect from the results, to make this also into a more democratic process. So while it may seem as a very expert-based type of dialogue, it also wants to achieve democracy in the design process. We also use this dialogue a lot in formal exhibitions. For instance, we're in the exhibition, the Rotterdam Biennale, where the research data is also presented to a professional public who has to engage with it, and on scientific fora. The tools that we used in this kind of professional environments tap into a bit the expectations of a professional environment. They use a lot of professional maps, high-tech tools, experience-rich tools. So we made this, of course, a slide doesn't allow to show this, but a nice atlas that you can browse about a project. There was also like this 360-degree film made of the coal track, and you can then browse the film, and then little films pop up about our researcher encounters. More these professional tools. The designer acts in this kind of process more as a catalyst, so not as an expert on sich, but catalyzing expert professional participants to discuss and use the material that was gathered in taking part in the design process. An issue here is that the small-scale initiatives that we really want to involve are not very much involved, in the sense that they're not around the table, but that they're more subjects of conversation than part of the conversation. A second type of dialogue, which is quite opposed, but also committed to this visualizing of what is present, is the committing dialogue. We did a lot of field work because there's not a lot of knowledge about the existing initiatives alongside the coal track. So we have this cargo bike of the other market, and we use the cargo bike to drive, to bicycle alongside the coal track where it is possible, because at several points it was impossible. The cargo bike has a do-it-yourself print press. And if we encountered an interesting initiative alongside the road, we invited people to make a small poster with one word that expresses their core skill, capacity, and to tell a story about their initiative. For instance, you see on the top, it's Muzaffer, and Muzaffer has he's part of a small football field, football stadium of the Turkish community in Genk. 10 minutes, yeah. And so he has built this football canteen and field with his own hands quickly after the mines closed. And he, and also others, so you also have an Italian football field alongside the Kolensporen and so on. So you have these different cultural communities. So he was in the picture, he called himself captain. He was one of the first captains of these football teams. Below that you see Elbina, who is part of a large row, 68 community gardens alongside the coal track, which she calls a big learning network. So it was informally grown and later on negotiated with the railway company that it became formal community gardens that could be maintained. Then below that you see a small ostrich farm. There's a lot of very informal farms, often by older Moroccan or Turkish people who came from the farmlands and saw an opportunity in this coal track to have this green space. And then typical for the younger community, more technically schooled, so it's typically more lower educated, technically schooled youngsters building cars alongside the coal track. And I can give you many more examples. But we made these pictures with all these people. So the tools we used here were deliberately more low-tech. So we did this cargo bike. We did a lot of audio interviews, turned it into podcasts, made pictures. And here we acted more as a trigger of publics, visualizing the different publics that are present alongside the Kolensporen and relate them to the trajectory and the research project. An issue here is that some of the informal initiatives really didn't want to be in the picture. For instance, the people running the ostrich farm, we never could trace them. So then we pictured the ostriches. Then a second type, were the questioning dialogues. There we started reflecting on what is, on the status quo, by started to speculate what could happen if these small-scale initiatives started maybe collaborating, working together alongside this coal track. So we started imagining about food stations, because if you ever visit Genk, it's really, all these cultures bring all these very nice food initiatives. You have these small sheep farms, bio farmers, and so on. Nice shops. You also have a compost master dealing with waste of food. So if we could bring these people together, could it be small experimentation places around food where people could also actually stop and eat something? Or also energy workstations, because it's an amazing opportunity that there's this big, long track that is not used, and that could be used for experiments around alternative modes of transport. You have Energyville, a large-scale initiative alongside the track, but you have this technically skilled population who could work together, so the community and this Energyville, in experimenting with these alternative modes of transport. So the tools we used to spread these speculative stories were postcards. So we made postcards with the stories that we start spreading in the city, posts on social media, podcasts. So these speculative stories started traveling and people started discussing them. And you saw that by doing that, some people started already taking initiatives, for instance, on the food stations, So here we take a more activist role. We reflect on the status quo through speculating in the future. And I think a challenge here is to really make the small-scale initiative a partner in doing these speculative stories, so that they're really rooted in the reality of the coal track. And then a second type of reflective dialogue were the agonistic dialogues, where we started confronting these different speculative stories with each other in different types of collages. We did permanent exhibitions still in exhibitions. It's not so formal like in the Biennale, but we put the stories on the wall. So people, if people enter the shop, they start discussing the coal track, even though they are not necessarily part of this trajectory, but it becomes part of the discussion in the community. Likewise, we have this online map of the coal track where the different podcasts can be listened to, and so people can make their own associations. And also in the atlas, we made this collage of these different stories. So here, the tools are these ways of gathering the stories in visually interesting ways. And we enter more in a matchmaker role, so questioning the status quo by bringing stuff together without trying to work towards solutions. Here again, small-scale initiatives had to be part of making these collages to also see their own story in the framework of a bigger project, right? And then the third and last type of dialogue is the expressive dialogue, which allows these initiatives to really act in the design process. So we did, and I think this is what we associate more classically with participatory design, we organized a lot of co-design workshops where we start making this mobility plan and these workstations, really designing it, using tools for ideation and expression. So we made this big carpet where the whole coal track is visualized on, and it's a leather carpet made of waste material, local waste material, made together with Studio Refugee as well. And so we documented all the research on this big carpet, and then people were given pieces of leather and they could start adding to it and modifying the carpet. So we had 4 groups each day, and each could take one piece of the carpet, work on one small spatial context and a theme, for instance, food, energy. And then at the end of the day, we brought the carpet together to discuss the more bigger picture of the connection. But of course, the printing press was also a way of doing that, and so on. So here we play the role of the co-designer. We initiate these more expressive dialogues by strategically connecting these small-scale initiatives also with the more larger scale, like IKEA, also the transport company, and with the policymakers and several experts. And yeah, the desire here was that these small-scale initiatives, by making together with us, would take also the process literally into their own hands. So here you see an overview of these types of dialogues. So we really wanted to start from these small-scale work initiatives. The challenge was to allow them to equally participate in the design process, and we researched how these capacities could be built via these different types of dialogues, associated with different designer roles and different types of tools. And to end with a discussion, so I think a lot of disappointments in this complex design, city design projects relate to designers who frame their role in a very narrow way. So I'm a design activist, and I want to trigger reflection in the community, but then in reality you have to do a lot of back office work, building relations, and also a lot of front office work, be entering in all these types of strategic dialogues. And on the other side, also often the tools or the instruments to enter in these types of projects are also often defined in a narrow way. You have a platform, and then if you don't explain what the role of this platform is in this bigger context, it becomes very difficult, for instance, for policymakers to understand. If we only show the cargo bike, but we don't explain what the intention is, then they would be like, what? Yeah, what are you doing? So I think more consciously addressing this big diversity of dialogues in the design process offers for the whole design team, the different stakeholders, more realistic orientation points in the process. For instance, the strategic agreements that you made, you can go back to them from time to time to remind yourself, okay, what did we agree upon? And at the same time, you can slow down a lot of these strategic conversations, working very quickly towards solutions by going back to these connecting dialogues. Okay, maybe the small-scale initiatives do not follow the pace that you are following in your small meeting room. Acknowledging the multidirectionality of this process provides also an opportunity to learn together. For us, making the carpet was a learning experience as much as for the people participating in it and using it. And acknowledging that makes a different atmosphere, a different kind of energy. Then framing the tools in the context of this concept of the democratic dialogue allows it also to see the relation between the roles of the designer and the participant, the capacities and the tools, and allows to understand their quality much better, and also their ability to be transferred maybe to other contexts and see the opportunities and challenges. So I think, therefore, my title was, it's not the tools, but the democratic dialogues that make smart cities work.
Liesbeth, there's one thing in particular that I'm curious about. The coal track is an important part of Genk's cultural heritage. I saw the manifesta in Genk, where coal played a tremendous role. It's very impressive. But I don't find much of that cultural industrial heritage in the ideas now for using the track. Ostrich farm, building cars. It's a convenient open space where all sorts of things are possible. But is there any link to the cultural heritage?
In a way there is, because I showed now more the initiatives, because you see, because it's an open space, people just appropriated it and developed their interests there and so on. But we also had a close look at the existing buildings there or the existing infrastructures, and how, for instance, also some of these initiatives could be matched by very interesting heritage infrastructure, for instance. So I think this heritage is really part of the process, and that's why I think also this first process of documenting and looking into the archives and so on is as important as looking into the field at what people are actually doing. Yeah.
But you also said that not everybody there was interested in the dialogue.
No.
I mean, who's the man behind the ostriches? We still don't know.
No, and I think we cannot force people to be, so the only thing we do is, we share these stories and people start discussing it, and sometimes people get interested on the road. So maybe in first instance they say, well, why would you take a picture of me or tell my story? I don't see any relation to this coal track. I just use it for my own convenience. But after a while, when these stories start to travel, then they might get triggered and interested in the story. So,
Did these people know each other until now?
No, I think that's one of the interesting things about the project, is that they didn't know each other. And we brought a lot of people together, and this generated a lot of small initiatives to further develop in new ways and new constellations. Yeah.
So now the football captain and the compost master are close friends?
The football captain and the Energyville, because now they're experimenting with, maybe we can use the energy experiments to warm up our football fields, so there the new coalitions are growing. Unexpected,
Liesbeth Huybrechts, thank you very much.
Thank you.